All right, Ted. Well, listen, truly appreciate you jumping on the podcast here. And for everybody who doesn't know who you are at this point, what's your background and what's your journey to your current role with Sacramento Republic?
Sure, Brett. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I've really enjoyed listening to some of your first few guests and feel honored to join you today. A little bit about who I am and what I'm all about. I just joined the Sacramento Republic and really consider myself of having the best job in the world. I consider myself a storyteller and a coach by trade, and I've got the pleasure of helping the great market of Sacramento experience our team in town and really launching and developing some careers in the business. But before I get into my current role as the head of ticket sales with the Republic, I'll tell you about how I got to where I am. Pretty unique journey. I grew up in minor league baseball. My pops worked in some strange parts of the country and from everywhere from East Lansing, Michigan to Peoria, Illinois to Huntington, West Virginia. And I really grew up running around the ballpark, crawling around the bleachers, crushing nachos and hot dogs, and feeling inspired to get into the business one day. 16 different moves across 8 states, Brett, 3 countries, and 7 different schools. And so when I was growing up, I was constantly the new kid. I was constantly moving around. And I think it taught me to be really scrappy and entrepreneurial and really try to make a name for myself in each new location that we moved. And so the 2 constants when I was growing up were sports business and hustling. I was the guy in the corner selling lemonade or comic books at recess. And so when it came time to try to get into the business, I knew that I needed to work for great people. I knew that I needed to hustle, and I knew that I needed to find a great home. And so when I was at Boston College, I tried to make it happen through a few internships in Major League Soccer, cut my teeth at the New York Red Bulls and Philadelphia Union during a couple summers when I was at BC. And from there, it really led me full circle back to the Philadelphia 76ers to launch my full-time career once I graduated. And if I look back to my senior year, I joke, and we can get into this a little bit later, that I had a bit of a quarter-life crisis, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and why I was doing it. And I wasn't just looking for a job or a career. I really wanted the calling. And so I was reaching out to all different mentors in the business, one of which was Chris Heck, who was the president of the Red Bulls when I interned there. And he invited me down to the 76ers to check out their ticket sales team at a pretty transformational time in the NBA, to put it lightly, on the court down in Philadelphia. And so my career compass, or my North Star, and what I was looking for when I was getting in the business, I knew I wanted to work for great people. I knew I needed a challenge, and I needed to actually learn how to sell and really get punched in the face and have a pretty gritty experience. And finally, I wanted to tell a great story. I didn't want to just be a part of any old franchise. I wanted to do something special. And so what originally started as a sales search to get into Major League Soccer landed me in the Sixers training facility, spring break of my senior year in college. And I fell in love with it. And it was really that challenge in the story that drew me to what the Sixers were building. I looked at it as an opportunity to really tell the greatest story in sports, and kind of a 30 for 30 type of feel that I was going to be a part of, a documentary unfolding. And so when I looked at, do I launch my career out with an MLS team? Do I start with a difficult situation like the Sixers? Ultimately, I wanted to go towards the biggest challenge I could find. And I looked at this like Frank Sinatra. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And if I can sell the 76ers, hey, maybe I can sell anything. You never know. Yeah. And so I packed up shop 2 weeks after graduating from Boston College and launched my career as an entry-level sales guy during the summer of 2014 with the Sixers. This was right before they drafted Embiid and Dario, and things were about to take off, and absolutely loved it. I spent 3 years there, both selling and coaching. My first year, I was just an entry-level inside sales guy, learning how to sell season tickets and groups and partial plans, and really follow that up throughout my tenure there with trying to take on new responsibility and roles in every chance that I saw. Over a few years, we sold out the building, believe it or not, Brett. So my first year, I was an inside sales guy. My second, I was an account executive. My third, I had the pleasure of overseeing one of our inside sales teams. We had the worst record over that 3-year stretch in NBA history. 19 wins, 18 wins, and 10. But once we sold out the building, and I noticed that that story was really ending. It was kind of a canvas that was being painted and hung on the wall. I was searching for something new to do, a new story to tell. And so two of my mentors and bosses, Brian Norman and Jake Reynolds, got tapped on the shoulder to oversee the Devil sales department just up the road in New Jersey. And I was fortunate enough to be invited along for the ride to really rebuild that department. So after spending 3 years with the Sixers, headed up the pike in I-95 to be the new head of sales with the New Jersey Devils and really build that department from the ground up through the new business team. So I oversaw the account executives and groups squads for about a year and a half. And when push came to shove, I had a conversation with Jake and I had a conversation with Brian Norman, my two mentors in the business, and said, "Hey, I'm ready to spread my wings a little bit. I'm looking for a new story to tell, and I'm looking for something to really be passionate about. I want to go taste the berries and find out if they're poisonous." And so the same thing that took me to the Sixers, working for great people, taking on a challenge and telling a great story, brought me here to the Republic. And as I looked around the business, there were a few stories and few situations like here in Sacramento that I felt like I could make a real difference. And so I joined this organization about 6 weeks ago, and I think we've got the real ability to put a franchise on the map and get this team to the MLS, put a stadium on the map and double the downtown size of Sacramento, and ultimately put Sacramento on the map of both the national and international scale. And I think we've got the ability to do something pretty extraordinary here. And so if I could sum that up over my last 4 years, I started off in entry-level sales. I worked my way up through the corporate track of being an account executive. My third year, I oversaw our internship department and an entry-level sales program, and then was fortunate enough to head up to New Jersey just after that before joining the Republic.
So two things I want to touch on from that, because I think it's such a cool and inspiring story, I think, for young salespeople that are entering. A lot of people always talk about, people are moving fast, millennials want to move quickly, but, there's something to earning it and buying your space in there that's really cool. But, I want to touch on, one of the stories real quick, because I think it's important to think about, because there are lots of sales staffs that are growing right now. And I think the story of the growth of the sales staff in Philadelphia is incredible, right? Going from 20 to 30 sellers under Jake all the way up to 100, right? And I had a chance to sit down with Jake and listen to some of the process quite a few years back. But if you can talk really quickly, like, how do you grow from 20 sellers to 100 sellers without losing the quality of the people that you're bringing into the organization? Because that's a huge challenge, right?
Unbelievable. Yeah. When I joined the Sixers, it was more of a small army than a sales staff. We had 120 individuals across entry and senior level sales. And so I was just trying to, fight to make a name for myself, stand out in the department. And what I think was the secret sauce was the people. It was Jake and Brian Norman not sacrificing on a hire and making sure they brought in talented A+ individuals and gave them the tools, training, and development to be successful. They didn't look at us like numbers on the page. They looked at each and every one of us as an opportunity to be a future star in this business. And then they invested in us. They made sure that the management team was just as large as the sales team, and that teacher to student ratio, if you will, was small enough that you had that one-to-one coaching. And you could rely on your teammates. What took me to the Sixers was the people. It was who I was going to learn from, like Jake and Norm and Scott O'Neill, then the people that I'd rub elbows with and learn what the business was all about. But more importantly, it was that sales staff, that army that brought me there. It was the people I was going to work with. And I knew that this is a lifestyle business. You're in early, you stay late. You have to enjoy the people that you work with, and you have to have opportunities to grow and learn with them. And what I loved about what Jake's philosophy was, he brought people in from all over the country. This wasn't individuals from Philadelphia that grew up basketball and Sixers fans. There were people that wanted to trust the process and tell a damn good story. And so we were all invested in ourselves and invested in the department. And when 5 o'clock hit, it wasn't the type of organization that people would go their separate ways. We would converge together. So it was more a collection, it was more a family than a collection of salespeople or a collection of individuals. And when I look back at my time there, I've got some of my best friends in the world. I've got my high school friends from Western Mass, got my college friends from Boston, and then I've got my Sixer sales and service family and friends from my years selling there. And I think they created more of a fraternity of friends and a family than a collection of sports business executives. And I think that was really the secret sauce.
Yeah, I think, not compromising on talent is such an important thing in this industry. There's a great quote from Guy Kawasaki, who did a lot of the hiring for Bill Gates, which was A people hire A+ people, they hire B people, pretty soon they wake up with Z people. And I think, that uncompromising way leads me to my next question a little bit, because, there is a real challenge to selling losing, right? And so I know that we'll talk about this probably a little bit later, but how do you sell losing?
Yes. Holy cow. When I got to the Sixers, I remember it was my third week on the job, there was a poll that it said who would win in a game straight up, the Kentucky or the NCAA Kentucky Wildcats or the Philadelphia 76ers. And 70% of the country thought Kentucky would beat us in a game. So my job was inherently pretty difficult. And I was asking people to buy 43 basketball games to a team that was raising both hands saying, we're not going to be very good this year. So we couldn't focus on the wins and losses on the court. We had to focus on the story and getting the fan base to believe in what we were selling. And what I love about what we were able to accomplish was we weren't selling championships, that's for sure. And I would say, Brett, we weren't even selling hope. We were selling belief. And I think those are the two biggest things you can sell in this business, hope or championships. But what brought it together in Philadelphia was the belief. We tried to get the fan base to say, if you don't get on board this year, you're going to miss out on that story. You're going to miss out on the experiences, the moments. And we might not be a very good basketball team this year, but in a few years from now, you can say you were there when Michael Carter-Williams was a rookie or Joel Embiid hit his first three ball. And it was that type of philosophy that would get our fans to want to come out and see a team that wasn't very inspiring on the court. It wasn't just to see LeBron or KD when they came into town. It was playing a starring role in that story that was unfolding and being able to say that you were there from the beginning to the end. And I think that's what really helped the market believe what we were doing. It wasn't the wins and losses on the court. It was being able to say that you were there, you grew, you experienced, and you were there with the team throughout the good and the bad.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and I'm sure we'll continue to touch back on it in a little bit as this conversation evolves. But I think you talked about going to making a conscious decision to join the 76ers for the people there, and I'm certainly in awe of what they've been able to accomplish, no doubt. And I think there's a lot of people in sports that scoff at it and scoff at the size, which I think is just ridiculous because, as we talked about, growing that and building that takes really incredibly talented people to grow that reputation, the positive reputation it's grown alongside it, especially in the Philadelphia community. So thinking about some of those people that you've had the opportunity to have as mentors or key sales influences, people who either guided you or sold next to you, who are some of those key influences for you? And most specifically about it, what was it about their style or their successes that really drew you to those people?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk all day about this, Brett. And what I love about this business is it's a pay it forward business. Everybody got help to get into the industry and learn from somebody great. And what I learned early on was to follow the people. Don't follow the logo. And the logo on the front of the jersey was irrelevant. It was the people behind the scenes that you were learning from and learning with. And that's what took me to the Sixers. And I would say some of the key sales influences I've had would be some of those mentors and executives at the Sixers. Two that I point to would be Scott O'Neil and Chris Heck. We can get into them a little bit. And then my first two bosses, Brian Norman and Jake Reynolds, were two of my biggest influences. In terms of Scott, he, in my opinion, is on the Mount Rushmore of sports executives and was one of the biggest reasons I wanted to go to the Sixers, to learn and grow in an organization run by him. I knew the pedigree and what I would learn would really translate well to long-term success in this business. And what Scott was able to do is set a big vision. He wanted to accomplish something great, and he inspired you to make it happen. He really made you feel like we could change the world through the power of sports and we could accomplish something special. One of my favorite quotes from Scott was, if you set the bar low enough, you're going to trip on it. And what he taught me in sales was to pitch high, to stay high, and to shoot for the stars, and make sure that we were accomplishing something special. And furthermore, with that, what I think Scott's secret sauce is that he's all about progress over perfection. When you accomplish something huge, whether it's closing a big deal, whether it's a sponsorship package like the jersey patch that we did, move on to the next one. This is the mountain range model, not the mountaintop model. And once you accomplish something extraordinary, what's next? And I think he was able to really set the vision, both for the sales team and for the entire company, inspire us to do something, and then say, hey, let's get up and let's do it again. Let's not rest on our laurels. It's time to move on to the next thing. So I can't speak highly enough of Scott.
And I think so. I want to touch on that real quick because I think that's
Sure.
so critical in sports, right? A lot of times sports has the disease of tomorrow, right? Like we need to make sure that we're maximizing revenue today, maximizing revenue today. Can we cut costs? Can we cut corners? Can we find a way to maximize today?
Yes.
If only the team were winning, we'd be doing better and blah 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 blah. And I think that was one of the things. I was similar to what you were in the 76ers on a much smaller scale. We went through when I was at the Crew, leading the league in attendance, even though the team had the worst 2 years it had ever had prior to it. So I'm there, and one of the things my boss used to always tell me, Clark Beacom, was, "Will we be proud of this 2 years from now?" Right? And so, can you talk really quickly about this idea of how do you balance tomorrow versus doing what's right for the organization overall? Because I think that is, having worked for Scott at Teambo, I think that's one of the things that Scott head and shoulders is above most people in this industry at.
Yeah, it's really difficult because in the short term, we've got to keep the lights on. And in the long term, you've got to have the discipline to do things today that aren't going to pay off until tomorrow. What I think Scott was able to do was give you the inspiration that it was okay to focus on something today that wouldn't pay off until tomorrow. Have the discipline to do the little things that'll pay off in the long run. And it really mirrored what was going on in the basketball court in Philadelphia, of trusting the process, of having the longest view in the room, and having the discipline to do what was right, even if it was difficult. And I think so often in sales, we're too worried about hitting our monthly sales quota, worrying about what's that next sale I need to make, worrying about the monthly MVP award, and not enough about, am I growing, am I learning, am I developing? And what I think Scott was able to do is really instill this growth versus results mindset. And don't worry about how much you've sold this month. Worry about how much you've learned, how much you've developed, how much better you've gotten. That is the formula for sustainable success. And the short-term results might mask your process. You have to make sure that you're doing the little things right to be great in the long term. And I think Scott gave us the platform to do that.
And I think what was brilliant about it is he was not just the stuff you were talking about, but he was cultivating a fan base alongside it. And, we certainly don't have to get into the recent stuff that happened at the 76ers, but I think it highlights, just how engaged that fan base has become. Because, I have one of my best friends who's the head of ticket sales now for Red Bull. He used to talk about how disengaged the 76ers fan base was, but you could just see with some of these recent events how he's brought that. They didn't just wake up when the team started winning. That fan base was cultivated when they started losing to where it is now, which you can just see by what's happened with the last few weeks, like how rabid that fan base has become. And that is not just a process of what Hinkie started and Colangelo continued, but that has everything to do with what Scott O'Neil started, right?
Exactly. I'd refer to it as the best 4-year overnight success story. It was that work behind the scenes during the tough years that led to the incredible success recently. And it really happened overnight, and it's pretty extraordinary. But it was that work behind the scenes that Scott and Jake and the ticket sales staff did to cultivate that fan base. And win or lose, somebody cared. They had an opinion, and it truly mattered.
That's great. So moving on, you're moving off Scott.
Yes. So a couple other big ones. I'd say Chris Heck was one of my big influences, not just to get into the business, but then once I got to the Sixers, he really established a badge of honor for who we were and what we were doing, and made sure that we paid attention to the small details. If you saw a piece of trash on a concourse, you needed to pick it up. If you were making a phone call, make sure that was the best phone call you're going to make of the day. Stick to the process. Make sure that those small details all mattered. And what I loved about Chris was it was critical that he was always in front of the staff. He was always available, and he lived and breathed the culture. He paid attention to those details as well. But that badge of honor is something I really learned from Chris. In terms of Jake Reynolds and Brian Norman, those are the two people I probably point to as my biggest influences and mentors in the business. Jake created the vision in Philadelphia, and if I can think of one thing that Jake did, he established a belief that you needed to be elite. You needed to expect to win. You needed to expect to be the best, to take your job and your career incredibly seriously, but not yourself. And he was able to really get the staff to buy in and want to be the best at what we did, but made sure that before and after hours or when the time was right, we didn't take ourselves too seriously and we could have some fun while we were doing it. I think it was the perfect blend of making sure that our career and our jobs were the number one thing at hand, but we had some fun while we did it. And the formula with Jake wasn't work hard, play hard. I hate that cliche. It was work hard and then play. It was make sure that there was a strict formula that you follow. We're going to work our asses off. We're going to accomplish great things, and then we're going to celebrate, but in that order. And because of that, he got the staff to buy in and to really do something extraordinary. Kind of that feeling of expecting and to win and being elite. If I could chat about Brian Norman, he's somebody that really taught me to be a storyteller and to shout our story from the mountaintops and to really drink the Kool-Aid, believe in what you're doing. And he's one of the most passionate, loud, ambitious leaders that I've ever met. And that's the exact type of person I needed in the summer of 2014 and 15 when we were losing or when we were winning 10 games a year. I needed somebody to inspire and push me to tell that story to the market and believe in what we were selling. But if I could take anything away from Norm, what he taught me was to find more mentees than mentors, to teach versus attach yourself to the people above you. And I think when my career took off, Brett, it wasn't trying to learn and attach myself to great individuals above me and rub elbows with great executives and leaders. It was when I started to make a commitment to the people around and beneath me to start teaching more than I was learning from those above me. And I think it was once I started teaching that I got better at my craft and better at sales, because if I had to role play, if I had to teach the sales process to a brand new entry-level hire, I had to know what I was talking about. And part of the beauty of the size of our sales staff was every few months we had a fresh crop of a new sales class, bright-eyed, bushy-eyed college students ready to get into the business that needed help, needed to learn, and needed to grow. And Norm taught me, go wrap your arms around them, take somebody under your wing, take them out to lunch, take them out to coffee, make sure that you're their go-to guy from day one and that you have more mentees than mentors. And I think it was that commitment to start teaching sales that allowed me to start really learning it a little bit better.
So I think it's a really easy question for people like you and me, but I don't think it's an immediately obvious question to people that are just getting in the industry or young salespeople. Why does teaching sales make you a better salesperson?
Yeah, well, I look at just how you learn and retain information. And I was the college student that if I was in the back of class and the teacher was lecturing, it was going in one ear and out the next. Or if I was watching a video, I learned a little bit more. And so for me to teach it, you have to know it inside and out. And it forces you to learn the entire sales process. It forces you, to know the minute details. And if you can't regurgitate the information and articulate it in a compelling fashion, somebody beneath you isn't going to be able to learn. And so I think it's critical that you take those people under your wing, and it forces you to look in the mirror and say, hey, am I practicing what I'm preaching? And what I found was when I would take an entry-level sales associate out to lunch to coach or mentor them, or I would role play with a new hire, it forced me to look in the mirror and say, hey, am I recommending products the right way? Hey, am I being energetic in my introduction? Am I focusing on next steps in the pattern of yes? And by teaching it, it held me accountable to practice what I was preaching. And I think it really caused me to develop and accelerate my growth because I had to teach it.
And so this is going to sound incredibly mean, but self-evaluation is worthless if you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's a great point. I love that.
All right. So that's great about those guys. And one thing that I want to talk about, because I think it's really important, is it's really critical in sales that we tell the story. And you've talked about being a storyteller. But I also think it's critically important that we are customer focused and customer first, right? So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we're not overwhelming them with our story, but they're a part of the conversation. So how do you balance telling the story, which at the Sixers was nuanced, right? Like you really had to tell a good story because that team was really, really bad. So how do you tell the story while also being customer focused? Because I think that's a balance that I see sales reps struggle with so much in professional sports, even ones on good teams.
Yeah, I'd say listening and asking good questions. The best salespeople don't sell people, they help people buy. And so when you're being customer centric, you're listening to learn, you're asking the right questions. You can't sell them a story if it's not one that they want to buy. And so I think it's critical before you even figure out what you're pitching them, where we're going in the future. I've got to listen. I've got to understand what makes you tick. And so I think listening and asking good questions is the formula to really sell somebody, to help somebody buy versus selling them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you've risen pretty quick in your career, and there are good salespeople everywhere. And I know we've already talked some sales philosophy, but I want to get you back to when you were selling. So what are some of the things that you did every day, or what were some of the characteristics that differentiated you as a salesperson? And then, leading into that, and maybe taking a step back afterwards, but how would you describe your sales process?
Definitely. Well, starting a bit higher level, I'll go back to Scott and that growth versus results mindset. I think what the characteristics that made me successful is that I was more focused on learning and out developing the people around me than out selling them. I wanted to make sure that I was growing and getting better each and every day, not just getting revenue up on the leaderboard. And I think that was the formula for sustainable success. Out developing the people around me. If I can point to three things, I put a little Post-it note my first week at the Sixers on my screen. It said, "Dare to be great, constantly evolve, and root for your teammates." And it was my rule of three, and it was really what I focused on to be successful. It was coming in each and every day, being ambitious, coming in with the attitude that I expected and wanted to be great, and it was willing to do the difficult things to make that happen. I think it's easy to come in and get complacent, to start cutting corners in sales, especially in sports sales once that honeymoon wore off. And daring to be great is easier said than done. But that was something I really focused on. That commitment to learning, growing, developing each day as well, constantly evolving, and then rooting for your teammates. I think those are the three things that I really focused on to grow during my 3 years there. But if I could go back to my sales process and who I was as a seller, it was being entrepreneurial. It was being disciplined. It was being direct. Starting each day with a purpose and a routine, and making sure that I set my day up and my week up for success, and didn't just run in and wing it each and every day. Keeping score. You mentioned self-analyzing, coaching yourself, making sure that you're not waiting to receive feedback. After each phone call, every appointment, I took score. What went well? What didn't go well? What can I do better? And really being my own harshest critic and my own harshest coach. In terms of being entrepreneurial, I think I experimented as much as possible. I wanted to make sure I was never getting in too many of the same habits or too much of a routine. And I was a firm believer that if I did what everybody else did, I was going to get what everybody else got. And so I needed to try new things. I needed to experiment. I needed to tweak my game a little bit and try something new, whether it was on the concourse or whether it was on an appointment or the phone. A and B test. Leave one voicemail. See which one got me more callbacks than the next. Keep score when I was calling gatekeepers, see which opening one-liner or benefit statement would get more of a laugh or get me through to the right person, and making sure that I wasn't just going through the routines, I was learning and getting better each and every time. In terms of being direct, Brett, I think this is what really helped me when I became an account executive, that jump from the captain of JV to riding pine on varsity, if you will, learning how to just get to a no and being okay with a no and not taking a maybe. And being direct, I think it often gets misrepresented as being an aggressive salesperson. And I think it's not about being aggressive or assertive. It's about being direct and not hiding the fact that I'm trying to sell you something, and not mistaking a friendly conversation for a successful one, which is something that I think many young sales professionals do, especially in sports, where we try to focus on the experiences and the moments and the magic. And being direct at the end of that phone call or end of the appointment is critical to make sure that there's clear next steps, and that before we chat again, we both know where we're going from here, and not hiding the fact that you're trying to sell them something. So if I could point to a few things, I'd say I was entrepreneurial. I tried to be direct. And then in terms of being disciplined with my time, it's critical that as a salesperson, your most valuable commodity is your time, where you're spending your focus, and making sure that you have the discipline to call new business and uncover opportunities. You have the discipline to nurture your pipeline and advance the folks you've already been chatting with. And you've got the discipline to call folks and close. And I tried to structure my day with an even balance of a third of uncovering new opportunities and adding them in there, and having that commitment to fresh first phone calls and filling the pipeline, which is never fun as an early sales professional. It's easy to call folks that you already know. But it was having that discipline to really shape my day and stick to what I knew would drive ultimate success.
I mean, we could do a part 2 and part 3 on this, just on entrepreneurialism and discipline, for sure. But one of the things that I want to bring back here is this idea of being direct, because I know, having started my career at CEB versus spending time in sports, just how indirect professional sports sellers are and how they go about what they do every day. So can you talk about really quick why customers appreciate directness from a salesperson, because I think a lot of times salespeople in sports hide behind their badge and just want to have good conversations and then hope that those people make their own decisions to buy, because they don't want to step on that person's fandom by being direct. But can you talk to people about how it actually enhances people's fandom and appreciation of the club and you as a salesperson when you are direct?
Yeah, I think inherently when people think of salespeople, they're expecting to be tricked a little bit. And so I think folks appreciate when you're direct, when you're to the point, when you don't hide the fact of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And in sports sales, we so often focus on the experience, the magic, the moments, getting to know somebody, talking about the story, painting the picture, getting them into the arena. And sometimes we hide it from the fact that we're trying to sell you something. And so I think it's critical that we're direct about that. And prospects, business owners appreciate that, because I think they're used to expecting the opposite. And for myself, too often I would get off the phone and think I had a great conversation, 10, 15 minutes. They sounded like they were interested. Call me next Wednesday, and they never pick up the phone. And what I figured out was, people are afraid to say no. Why don't I give them a chance to say no? I don't want to mistake this really great conversation for a successful one if they're on the end of their phone and have no intention of meeting that phone call next Wednesday or attending the appointment that we just set. And so before we get off this phone call, before we get off this appointment, let's just both be clear with where we're going from here, And so those direct next steps are really going to help you get a few more wins than trying to bait and switch.
And I love that, because I don't know a lot of other sales trainers that do this, but one of the best things that I taught in sales training was lead qualification, right? Because ultimately, you as a salesperson don't just need to value their time, you need to put a value on your time as well. And I think the salespeople who value their own time aren't afraid of no's. They abhor and hate maybes. And they're the ones that believe that the more decisions they get, the more yeses that they're ultimately going to get. And I know that sounds easy, but it just seems like people in sports are so comfortable with maybe in a way that I just was so weird to me when I moved into sports from CEB.
Yeah, and it's the biggest curse in sales, following up with somebody that has no intention of buying and chasing those maybes. And so let's just give them a chance. I called him out of the blue. Hey, it's Ted. I know you weren't expecting my phone call today. Is this something that you even want to do, Brett? Before we get on the second phone call, are you comfortable moving forward? Is this something you can expect and see yourself pulling the trigger? Because if the answer is no, let's save both of ourselves some time here. And I think just giving somebody an out is critical so that you're not wasting your time or theirs. But as you mentioned, there's nothing worse than following up with somebody that has no intention of buying. And we chase too many maybes for sure.
This is the most incredible. I think this is one of the most incredible points, because every time I do a sales training or I talk to directors or I talk to reps, it's always like time management. I need to manage my time better. And I'm always like, listen, I guarantee you I can give you an hour back in your day. Here's an hour's worth of time that you're chasing people who don't want anything to do with you every day.
Yes. Don't chase the ghost accounts. Pivot and move on. And if you spent that same amount of time doing something else, you'd see a greater return. It's all about return on energy. Spend your time on something that's going to give you the greatest possible outcome. And if you took that 1 hour of chasing down those ghost prospects that have been giving you maybes and you spent it on new business, I bet you would see a greater return. So I totally agree with you. Steal that time back.
And I think the most important thing is to teach a young rep to have that belief that the next new person that's not avoiding you is more valuable than that person who's avoiding you, even though you had that conversation and you thought the rapport was there.
100%. I couldn't agree anymore.
All right. So pivoting a little bit, I hope people really took that in. But pivoting a little bit is, I'm a big believer, when people say, what do you see, having sold basketball and soccer, what are the differences between selling both of those? And my response is always, I think it just kind of depends on what market that you're in. Because I'm a big believer that each market in each sport is different from a sales standpoint. So what was different about selling basketball in Philly versus selling hockey in Jersey? And I know you're still, getting to know soccer in Sacramento, but, what have you seen that's different in terms of those locations in sports? And, what do you see as holds true across each one of them too?
Yeah, part of me would say, hey, sales is sales, and it's going to translate from one sport to the next. I would focus on the market, as you mentioned, Brett. I think the biggest difference between the three markets I've sold in is who you're targeting to sell your product and how you're framing that particular product.
Yes.
And in Philadelphia, we were a big team on the downswing. It was about inspiring the masses. It was about telling an inspiring story and selling season tickets. Versus in New Jersey, we're a bit more of a niche. We're in the New York City market on this huge totem pole of NBA and NHL and MLB teams. The Devils certainly weren't at the top of it. And so we didn't have the masses that we did in Philadelphia. And we had to focus on businesses or hockey families and how we framed our product. In Sacramento, it's a little bit different. This is a much different market than either of those two places. And who we're targeting is different. Youth soccer, families, groups in the area. We don't have the shiny spaces and nice finishes of the Wells Fargo Center or Prudential Center, and maybe the corporate dollar isn't going to go quite as far in Papa Murphy's Park where we play. And so I would say from the three different locations I've been, I think what's different about them is who we target and how we frame our particular product. But I think what's the same is you have to be the expert. You have to have product knowledge. You need to know what you're selling. And just like you wouldn't buy a car from a car salesman that didn't know the horsepower, you're not going to buy a soccer ticket from somebody here in Sacramento that doesn't know the game, or a salesperson in New Jersey that doesn't know the hockey team. So I think one of the biggest similarities is own and know your product, be the expert. And I think the formula for success rings true no matter where you are. You've got to work your ass off. You've got to get better each day, and you've got to be a good teammate. And the other thing that I think holds true no matter where you're selling is that storytelling, getting fans to buy into something larger than just next year. I think moments and experiences sell this upcoming season, but a story sells a long-term success. And I think all three markets I've been in is focusing around a larger story for sustainable success than just focusing on those moments or experiences.
So one of the things I want to touch on real quick, because I'm a huge believer in this, and it's been backed up by a lot of my friends that I've seen that have either been outside of sports or left sports, and they talk about the importance of product knowledge. And one of the most dangerous expressions that I hear in sports is you need to know enough to be dangerous. And sure. I couldn't disagree more in the age of the internet. I think you need to be more than dangerous. I think you need to know everything that you can possibly do to invest yourself into learning about your stadium, your team, your league, your sport, your city. So can you talk about why that's so important?
Absolutely. I think sports is one of the few things in the world that transcends all shapes, sizes, colors, boundaries. And because of that, you need to be a chameleon. You need to talk to different types of customers, old timers, new timers, young folks, old folks, businesses, families, and everyone's a little bit different. And so when I started at the Sixers, I couldn't just know one or two players on the team. I needed to be able to talk to business owners. I needed to be able to talk to folks from the Dr. J years. I needed to be able to talk to individuals that were just moved to Philadelphia and were in college in the area. And every customer is a little bit different. And so it's critical that you know the entire story. You know the entire holistic approach of the business or company that you're at. And it's not just knowing the game, it's knowing the team, it's knowing your company. You have to be the expert. And what that will translate to, Brett, during your pitch is confidence. If you know what you're talking about, you can be a little bit sharper, you can be crisper, you'll have confidence, and it'll translate. Nobody wants to buy something from somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. And if we're about to ask a prospect, whether it's a business or a family, for a few $1,000s, or several thousand, they want to feel confident that you know what you're talking about and their money is going to good use. And if you're unsure in what you're pitching, or if you're unsure of the company that you're with, your prospect is going to sense that. And so I think if anything, that product knowledge really just gives you confidence throughout your sales process. And you got to be able to talk to everyone, from Fortune 500 companies, CEOs, VPs, down to the father and son that only catch one game a year. And the beauty of sports is, sales and what we do, it affects, the father and son that come to one game a year for that kid's birthday. And it also affects businesses that need the season-long suite deal. And you've got to be able to talk to the entire range, the entire spectrum, and figure out what makes each of those customers tick to move the needle. And if you're not the expert on your product, you are not going to be able to do that.
Well, and product knowledge is the biggest differentiator between two types of sellers. And I've actually been doing a lot more research about this recently, but I think there are two types of sellers: expert sellers and kitchen sink sellers.
That's fantastic.
The expert seller is the person that knows their product with the confidence that I can stand in any situation, have a conversation, and make a recommendation. The kitchen sink seller, and pardon my language, is the person who sits there and goes, "Oh crap, here are the 5 questions my manager taught me. Now here's everything we have. Oh my God, I hope they buy." And I don't think there's an in between, right? Like, you could be a really good seller, but if you don't have the confidence in your product, at some point you're going to benefit dump, you're going to ticket package dump, because you're not going to have the confidence in the conversation to be able to make the recommendation. And I don't think there's a road in between. Like, I think you either have the confidence to listen to someone and make a recommendation, or you don't.
Yes. If you're not listening and asking those good questions to be able to have a confident pitch back, you're going to fail. And as you mentioned, without the product knowledge, you tend to just information dump. You tend to just throw out all the benefits, the bullet points, and word vomit, versus listening and tailoring your pitch to what they actually need. And if you want to sell a solution, you've got to listen, and you've got to know your product. And
so, I mean, that's such a good point. And pivoting in the essence of time a little bit, because I think these things are important. We've lost some really good people over the last few days to some of the issues that come with when you push yourself too hard, and you work too hard, and it creates some challenges for people. And so you're someone that's been in sports for a while, you moved around a while, you have a great positive attitude about it, and I want to know, for you, how have you been able to maintain a positive work-life balance and be someone that seems so energetic about this, even though you always talk about that hard work too?
Oh, I'll tell you what, Brett, I think I'm probably the worst person to ask this question to. And if I was my girlfriend, I would have broken up with me years ago. I needed to be better about this. What I would say is I focus less on balance, and I focus on the trade-offs. Where am I spending my time? And then being present, whatever I'm doing. And this is another great lesson I learned from Scott, to bring his name up again. Yeah. What he mentioned was, life is about sacrifice and life is about trade-offs. This is one of those industries that's a lifestyle. And sometimes you can kid yourself if you focus too much on balance. And so what I try to do is I try to be present. I'm thoughtful. When I'm home, I put my phone away. When I'm in a one-on-one, I'm making eye contact. I'm giving you 100% of my focus and attention, and not thinking about that next meeting, next one-on-one, next training session I need to do. And so I think, the work-life balance is about being disciplined to be focused and present in each and everything that you're doing, versus trying to have a magical formula where you're in the office or not in the office enough. And so I've made a conscious decision that, I'm going to sacrifice responding in the group text. Maybe I'm going to miss that New York City reunion with my friends from BC. Maybe I'm going to not be able to attend that happy hour at 6 o'clock tonight with my buddies. But I'm focusing on that long term, and I know the short term sacrifice will pay off. But what I would say is being present each and every day, and I think that's what I focus on versus the balance.
And I think this is something too. If you learn to love your job, sacrifice is almost a strong word, right? Because if you're walking into the office and you feel challenged and motivated every day, if you're still finding time to be present to the people that you really do care about, and you love sports and you love that opportunity to provide memories and opportunities for what you loved in your youth, I think sacrifice, we use that word a lot, but I think it's such a strong word. If you genuinely love what you do, you certainly have to be conscious about being present and conscious about spending time away so you can recharge your batteries and do a lot of that stuff. But I tend to think sacrifice sometimes is a really strong word if you genuinely love what you're doing.
I completely agree. I think it's more about trade-offs and prioritizing what's most important. And I would agree. I think sacrifice is a strong word. And so it's what's most important today? What's most important this week? Where do I need to spend my time to give me the greatest long-term return? And that's what I focus on versus the sacrifice, the trade-offs.
Yeah, and listen to yourself too, right? Because seasons are long, and things happen, and listen to yourself. If you get to that place where you need to take a step back, unplug your phone, get away, sit down for a day. But if you love what you're doing, you'll always be excited to get back to it.
100%.
All right, so closing this down like we do in every single one, you've moved pretty quickly in your career, and you've worked for some incredible organizations. So, what drives you? What do you get up every day fired up to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brett. And I mentioned before, I had a quarter life crisis when I was at Boston College. I joke. I was heading into spring break and I was deciding, what do I want to do with my life? And what originally seemed obvious, I want to chase the sports dream, turned into a difficult dilemma when I saw my girlfriend get a job at JP Morgan or my freshman year roommate get a job at Goldman Sachs. And I said, heck, do I want to grind it out in entry-level sales for a couple of years? And what I realized, Brett, was I wasn't looking for a job and I wasn't just looking for a career. I needed a calling, something that would drive and inspire me each and every day. And so what drives me is the magic, the power of sports, the ability to have an impact on the world. And there's not a business quite like ours that has the effect, whether it's the streets of Mumbai or it's the skyscrapers of New York City. This business and what we have the pleasure to do every day affects everyone. All you need is a trash can and a ball to kick it or to throw it into, or a wall to kick it against. And what drives me is what we get to accomplish and the impact that we can have in this business. And one of my favorite TED Talks that I'm sure you've seen and your listeners have seen is the Simon Sinek. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And for me, what drives me to do the crazy things that I do is the impact that I know that I can ultimately have on the greater community and also on my individual sales team and the people around me. And so I would say what drives me long term is that impact of sports, but it's a little bit off in the distance. It's fluffy, it's fuzzy, it feels good. But in the short term, what drives me is launching and growing careers, making a difference in the lives of the people in our organization and the people I have the pleasure to oversee. Seeing an entry-level college or seeing an entry-level salesperson, get their first promotion and the inspiration in their eyes and what they've been able to accomplish, pushing somebody to their limits, helping somebody accomplish something that they never thought they'd be able to. And so I would say in the short term, it's really launching and growing careers, and this powerful business of sports that we're in causes some people to do crazy things like move across the country for their first job in the business. And so this business is powerful, and I'm lucky enough to be in it. But I would say that the magic of this industry and then launching and growing careers, probably the two biggest things that drive me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I want to touch back on, you talking about the power of sport. And I think one of the things that, when young sales reps or any sales rep gets in a rut, it becomes way more like a sales job than a sports sales job. One of the things that I'd always tell them, and something that I sometimes didn't do a good enough job of reminding myself, if we're being completely honest, was if you get that level of frustration, if you feel those challenges, like walk out and take a walk around your stadium, right? And then every single game that you have, whether it's the last 30 minutes of a soccer game, the third period of a hockey game, the fourth quarter of a basketball game, when no one wants to talk to you, don't just watch the game, look at the people in the stands, right? Like there isn't any better reminder of why you do this than when you take a few seconds to watch those people, because your team might be losing by 30 points in the game. But if you take a look in the stands and you see dads hugging their daughters or moms talking to their sons about strategy, people jumping up and down, cheering, friends cheersing over a beer, like, there is something really remarkable about what you do. And, one of the things that I used to tell reps, and again, stuff that I think we should do more, like you live in a city, go to another sporting event in that city, like take some time to be a fan yourself, and continue to remind yourself that this is gonna sound, we don't live a real life. Like we get to do sports every day. If you can ultimately create some perspective for yourself around that, and you take what you do in your job seriously, but you don't take your job seriously, you're going to be incredibly successful, if that makes sense.
100%. It's, take a step back, pinch yourself, enjoy the ride a little bit. This is such a fast-paced and moving industry that it's often easy to get caught up in the losing streaks or the tough moments or the sales slumps. And what got me through the tunnel vision of the tough losing streaks or the dog days of summer was that why. And taking a moment of each game for myself, whether it was the national anthem or making a memory for a fan or getting their feet on the hardwood, and remembering why we do what we do. And I don't know about you, Brett, when I was falling asleep dreaming of getting into sports, it wasn't about selling partial plans and season tickets. It was about making a difference in the world. And so when push came to shove and it got difficult, I focused on that why, the long-term vision of what I'm going to accomplish one day and what I'm learning right now that'll help me get there, not how many partial plans have I sold this week. And I equate it very similarly to, heck, when I was in college and I was stressing out for exam week. I don't remember 5, 6 years later what classes I took, what grades I got on the exam, but in the short term, that drove me crazy. What I do remember is the experiences, what I learned, the people I shared it with. And so what I would say when the going gets tough in sports and sales, focus on that why, focus on what you're learning and growing each day, not on the results. And just like I look back and I don't remember whether I was number 1 on the leaderboard, number 3, whether I sold $10,000 or I hit a goose egg in July of 2015 with the Sixers. I don't remember what I got on my sophomore year calculus test, but I remember who I was with. I remember what I learned. And so focusing on that why is what's going to drive you, not the short-term results.
Well, when you were taking that calculus class officially makes me feel really old right now. So we can officially end it there. But listen, and I want to make one point to what you just said, not to make like if someone's listening here and they think that what you just said is corny, because trust me, my reps and my people have heard that everywhere I've been, almost every time I talk. If you think that feels corny, this just isn't going to be the industry for you, right? Like, I'm sorry. If you don't think what we do has a much broader impact than just selling that partial plan or just selling that season ticket or just selling that corporate suite or just selling that group outing, this is not going to be the industry. It's not. Get out, go find that thing where it's going to give you, that's going to allow you to leave at 5 and allow you to make $100,000 a year when you're 25, right? Like, go do that. Because this just isn't going to be in it for you if you don't have that broader view of what we're really doing.
Yeah, we work too hard. We don't get paid enough to love what we do every day. And you have to feel like you're making a difference. I couldn't agree more. That's what will drive you each and every day.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, listen, Ted, this was awesome. I genuinely appreciated the time. This is, I think it's going to be a good shot in the arm for everyone who hears it and listens to it. Love your energy and certainly best of luck out in Sacramento. And I have a big belief that franchise has got huge things for it on the horizon.
Absolutely. I mentioned I'm a storyteller, and that's what brought me out here, to put a franchise on the map, a stadium on the map, and a city on the map. And I'm, fortunate to do what I do every day. So hope to connect with you soon, Brett, and can't wait to see you in Sacramento soon.
Absolutely, bud. Thanks.
Take care.